How's your day today? Are you sitting there watching and also thinking about all the little and maybe big things that are stressing you out? Your bills, your kids, maybe a disagreement you had with a family member or a neighbor? Well, tonight we're going to take a step back from all of that and think about something bigger, much bigger. The results of a new study that take a look at the very fabric of the universe and the local scientists who played a part in a huge discovery. Here's Ashley Koch to explain.
Think of the fabric of the universe like it's a blob of Jell-O.
Really firm Jell-O.
If something hits Jell-O, it's gonna jiggle. If something big enough meets space-time, the so-called fabric of the universe, well, same deal. Or so the theory of gravitational waves goes.
Gravitational waves are vibrations in the Jell-O.
Jeffrey Hasboon is an astrophysicist at Oregon State University. He and his students are part of a huge discovery about the way space and time move throughout the universe. Gravitational waves are ripples in the fabric of space-time. Einstein predicted them more than a century ago as part of his theory of relativity. Hasboon and another OSU professor, Javier Siemens, are part of an international collaboration of hundreds of scientists called NanoGrav,
which is the North American Nanohertz Observatory for Gravitational Waves.
So while you and I were wondering what we're going to have for dinner or analyzing our crush's latest text, the NanoGrav scientists were analyzing data from pulsars. Pulsars are what's left behind when massive stars die. They spin through space at regular intervals, so scientists can treat them as giant ticking clocks. They emit radio pulses, which can be picked up by radio telescopes here on Earth. So all the researchers have to do is keep an eye on those pulses and how often they arrive to see if there are any anomalies.
If they arrive a little bit later or a little bit earlier, that can be evidence for a gravitational wave passing by because the length between us, the distance between us, is either extended or contracted a little bit.
I'm making it sound simple, but this was a very long project. These waves are huge, light years in frequency.
To really see the wave, you need to see from one peak to the next of the waves. And from peak to peak, they could be 15 years apart. So you could see one peak and have to wait 15 years to see the next peak.
After analyzing 15 years worth of data from the radio telescopes, they were able to detect a symphony of gravitational waves, some with high frequencies, some with lower frequencies, a whole chorus of cosmic waves reverberating throughout the universe.
Here is that pattern. This is the unique fingerprint of a background of gravitational waves, and there's nothing else we know of in the pulsars, in the intervening gas, or on Earth that can produce this pattern.
So where exactly are these waves coming from? That's the next question scientists will be looking to answer, but they have an idea.
The objects that we think we are seeing are supermassive black hole binaries at the centers of galaxies that are billions of times the mass of the sun.
Hasboon says that this discovery is just the beginning of what we could someday learn, and it could tell us a lot about what's going on in the universe and where we all come from.
So you can have predictions of things like dark energy or dark matter, big open questions that have ramifications for gravitational waves early in the universe. So these could be the reverberations of the Big Bang.
I know, you've got a lot going on. There are a lot of real-world concerns here on the Earth. But as you're thinking about those little things, going about your night, just remember that something bigger is happening in the great beyond. Something huge and far away with ripples that come right back here to Earth. Ashley Koch, KGW News.
That's incredible stuff, isn't it? So the next phase of the gravitational wave research will combine the NanoGrav research with other ground-based methods of detecting the waves. It's a mission between NASA and a European space agency called LISA, and it's set to fly a space-based detector sometime in the 2030s. Researchers expect that it'll allow them to see almost all of the compact black hole binaries in our galaxy. Needless to say, they're pretty excited about it. I believe so. Well, hey, Oregon's Measure 113, remember, it was hailed as the fix to the state's long history of legislative walkouts that stall business in Salem and then threaten budgets and bills. The idea was that if a lawmaker had 10 or more unexcused absences in a single session, then they would be barred from holding office for a single term after Their current term is over. Seems like a simple enough idea on the surface, but as we all know, Senate Republicans in Oregon paid little regard to the measure that 68% of Oregonians approved, flouting the law this past session and promising to challenge it in court if they're not allowed on the ballot. So it's something that many of you have strong feelings about.
Pat, I want to know why we vote these things and then people turn around immediately afterwards and decide that they want to get rid of them. Why do we vote for anything at all?
And James wrote into us saying, what's going on here? We voted this into law. Does this mean that our vote no longer counts when our elected officials don't want to follow them? I'll bet these politicians also went from one parent to the other when they didn't get the answer to their liking. Ooh. We also heard similar messages from you about Oregon's Measure 114. That's the gun control law that voters narrowly passed in November. It has not been law, though, for a single second in the state because of immediate court challenges before it was implemented. We kept hearing a question from you on this. Are these ballot measures not tested for legality before the voters vote on them? Well, the short answer, no. They're not. Let's explain, though. So we asked the Secretary of State's office about this, since the Elections Division is part of their work. They told us the Oregon Constitution establishes a limited set of requirements, which are enforced by the filing officer when a petition is filed. For statewide initiatives, the Oregon Elections Division is the filing officer. County or local initiatives are filed with the counties. All right, so stay with me here. So they pointed us to the elections manual on statewide initiatives and ballot measures that lays out all of these constitutional requirements. Here they are. So the measure must have a single subject or closely related subject. It must include the full text, and it must be legislative rather than administrative in nature. Okay, so for petitions involving constitutional amendments like Measure 113, the requirements are this: multiple subjects that are not closely related must be voted on separately, and the initiative must amend rather than revise the Constitution. So it seems fairly straightforward, except maybe for that last part, amend and revise. The difference? Well, amend is to add something new, while revise is to change part of something that already exists. Anyways, you'll notice the Constitution says nothing about legality of initiatives. So it surely has to be in this manual, right? Well, it lays out the entire timeline of an initiative petition from the beginning to the end, 16 different steps on a very confusing arrow-filled page, from gathering signatures to certifying a ballot title and really everything in between. But we found nothing about legality. If you dig into the nitty-gritty of each step of the process, which our team did, our answer comes to us at the very bottom of a page, notated with the circled lowercase I. Well, the Secretary of State does not review the prospective petition for substantive constitutional or legal sufficiency. In fact, there is nothing else about the legality of a measure even mentioned in this manual, apart from the constitutional requirements that we already told you about. So that's what's going on when voters pass a ballot measure, but it's immediately challenged in court. Simply put, it's not checked for legality along the way. If an initiative has enough sponsorship signatures, the Attorney General will write the ballot title, then certify it after hearing comments. Then more signatures are needed. And if they're gathered and they meet the measure meets those constitutional requirements, that it goes to the ballot. Legality, apparently that's supposed to be figured out later, often in the courts. The Secretary of State's office simply says in the U.S., a law, whether passed through the initiative process or legislature, can be challenged in court if a person or group of people can show that the law harms them. And that's what's happening with Measure 114. And if Senate Republicans don't get their way and follow through on a promise of their own, well, that's the fate of Measure 113 as well. I know that was a lot to digest, but I want to know, what do you think about the initiative petition process in Oregon? Do you think things should be checked for legality before we vote on them, or not? Do you worry some ideas may be shot down before voters get a chance to decide if the Secretary of State plays a legal part before it hits the ballot? Well, let us know what you think. Send us an email to thestory@kgw.com, or you can call and leave us a voicemail. We love to hear from you. 503-226-5090. Well, coming up next on The Story, if you were watching TV or listening to the radio this past Saturday, you might have been interrupted by a concerning message saying that civil authorities have issued an immediate evacuation for all of Oregon. Before you get too worried, though, it was a mistake tied to wildfire evacuations east of Klamath Falls. But we want to know, how does something like that accidentally happen? We'll tell you what the state has to say about it when the story returns. All right, let's take a look at some of your thoughts on our big story yesterday here on The Story. Our Blair Best had a rare ride-along with the crew from Portland Fire Station 1 downtown to see how overdose calls have become all too routine. She spent 4 hours with them earlier this month, and in that time they responded to 1 assault call and 0 fires. The rest of the calls they responded to were all for overdoses. In fact, Fire Station 1 crews averaged 10 overdose calls every single day last month. And Blair showed us how there does not appear to be an end in sight to these types of calls. The majority of your comments blamed Measure 110 for legalizing user amounts of hard drugs in the first place.
I feel for the firefighters because they're helpless. However, Measure 110 needs to be repealed. And after that, they need to outlaw public use and something more with fentanyl needs to happen.
Jeff wrote to us saying, I do not feel any empathy for idiots who know the dangers of fentanyl and still keep using the drug. Measure 110 is ruining our state and cities. The firefighters should just stop responding to fentanyl overdoses. Well, David chimed in as well, writing, Portland has made it way too easy for the drug addicts that live on the street to stay there and do their drugs. Time for some honesty about what's happening and where and why these people are here. Lax drug laws. Bring back sense. Give these people a bottom to reach other than their own deaths. How about this one from Robert? This story made me seethe with anger more than any other story you've ever done. To see 10 or so EMT fire department personnel standing around yet another fentanyl overdose victim is beyond maddening. It's no mystery why 911 takes so long to answer. I hope to God I never need emergency medical attention in Portland. You know, every overdose call in Blair's story ended with the overdose victim refusing to be taken to the hospital because in each case they had already been given Narcan before fire crews arrived. That prompted questions like this one from another viewer named Robert saying, why are emergency services going to people who don't want help? If they don't want help, why are they calling them to come? And who pays for those services? I have to pay for emergency services when I use them. So who is paying the bill for these services? Now, the short answer to that question is one I think you already know the answer to. The taxpayers are footing the bill. So let's end with this message from Jane, who I think echoes the way many of you are feeling. She wrote, if Narcan is not available, people will die from overdoses. If Narcan is available, people will continue to use drugs and there will be no consequences for their behavior. As a society, do we just accept that there will be drug addicts on the streets committing crimes to support their habits and there's no recourse? This is just the way it is. I don't know where we as a community go from here. Yeah, wow. Well, if you missed Blair's story yesterday, you can watch it right now on the KGW YouTube channel. Just scroll down to the story section to find it. And if you ever miss a show and want to catch up, this is a really great place to start. You can watch the full episodes or just individual segments. The page is updated every weekday. Well, those of you watching TV or listening to the radio this past Saturday, just after 4 o'clock, got quite a surprise message over the airwaves. It likely looked or sounded a lot like this. The civil authorities have issued an immediate evacuation for all of Oregon, beginning at 4:22 p.m. Saturday, July 22nd, and ending at 5:22 p.m. Saturday, July 22nd. Before we go any further into this, it was all a mistake. Just want to be upfront about it. This was supposed to go to people in certain parts of Klamath County because of the Golden Fire burning east of Klamath Falls. As of this morning, it's burning across 2,100 acres and is 15% contained. 43 homes have been lost, and the cause of the fire is still under investigation. The fire prompted some level 3 go now evacuation orders over the weekend, and that is why the alert was sent in the first place, but it was sent statewide on accident. The Oregon Office of Emergency Management says it was because of an operator error. Oregon's emergency alert system sends out warning notices via radio and broadcast TV, as well as through cable systems and satellite radio. This is separate from the wireless emergency alert system, and that sends those notifications to our phones, right, our cell phones. Both systems were used on Saturday, and the cell phone alert was sent to those in the intended area. But according to a Facebook post, the system for TV and radio includes a little checkbox that specifies a certain location, and the person who was sending the alert, well, they did not check that box, causing the message to be broadcast statewide. Not a great day in the office for whoever did that. Yeah. The State Office of Emergency Management apologized for the confusion and says it fixed the system to avoid this from happening again. Let's hope so. Well, still to come here on The Story, a nearly 3-decade-old murder at one of the Pacific Northwest's most notable national parks remains unsolved. What we know about a park employee who vanished, her body found months later, and what her co-workers from back then have to say about it now.
Next at 6:30, continuing coverage of that shooting in Tualatin that sent a Washington County Sheriff's deputy to the hospital in critical condition. We'll have a live update from Legacy Emmanuel Medical Center. Plus, Portlanders with mobility challenges say they're being threatened by people living near the Old Town Mac Stop. Why they say the daytime camping ban isn't helping. And we'll tell you why the water level in a popular Southwest Washington lake will soon be going down, way down. Those stories and more coming up next at 6:30.
Well, Mount Rainier is one of Washington's most beautiful landmarks, but for friends and family of one woman, it's haunted them with an ominous past. The body of Sheila Kearns was found in Mount Rainier National Park 7 months after she went missing. The 43-year-old was working at the park when she disappeared in 1996. Tonight, her former co-workers still wonder what happened to the woman they knew.
Co-workers say Kearns is an accomplished day hiker, but it would be very unlike her to go out and stay several days. That adds to their worry and the urgency of the search.
She was beautiful. I mean, she was absolutely beautiful.
She was so happy. It was just that glow on her face.
She had like these very, very clear eyes that to me like reminded me of, you know, the mountain streams that we had up there.
The person they're describing is Sheila Kearns, a woman they worked with at Mount Rainier National Park.
This was the summer of '96. Around August, most of the kids go back to school. So the crew's kind of down, but we still need to finish up for about 6 weeks. That's when Sheila came on. She worked the front desk, but she always would say hi to me and we would talk, and she just had this infectious smile about her. She just glowed.
You know, you definitely got the sense that she loved being up at the park and at Rainier.
And I always throw a going away party or farewell party for everybody. I'd build a great big fire and get a keg of beer and of course some food to feed them, and we're just saying goodbye to everybody. And Sheila came up. I'll never forget this. She came up to the fire and just the glow on her face, and she goes, "Jules, I got hired on for the winter crew." She goes, "I'm so excited, we'll be working together." And I was just like, wow, that's great. And that's the last time I saw her.
Sheila Kearns went missing in October of 1996.
She dined here with friends and co-workers Friday night, and that's the last time anyone saw her.
Now we're looking for is just anything that will give us some kind of direction.
Multiple law enforcement agencies responded once Sheila went missing, including the National Park Service. But the FBI took over the case because it happened in a national park.
At the time that she was reported missing, she was moving into some new housing at Mount Rainier National Park.
The manager who tried to find her the next day went to her room because she didn't show up for work. They said that her slippers were real nice and tidy there right by the bed, and her bed she hadn't slept in it.
There was apparently like this massive 3-day search, like with dogs. How could they not have found her? I find that strange.
I think she was under the snow at the time.
It wasn't until May of '97 her remains were located.
Well, right now we're looking at the community building. This is the old Longmire campground. This is where Sheila's remains were initially found.
Her remains had been scattered around about a 300-yard area.
And then when I found out a couple of months later that this is where her body was found, I mean, that was just, like a visceral gut hit. Until this day, I have never come back here.
When Sheila went missing, the FBI spoke to a number of possible suspects, including some of the people we spoke with for our story. However, investigators say everyone they spoke with was clear.
Just because a person was cleared in an investigation a number of years ago doesn't mean that new information might come to light which makes them a subject or a suspect again.
It's just a sinister type aura around what had happened to her. And it made you wonder, is there somebody out there?
I didn't want that fear to limit how I lived my life, and simultaneously it did limit how I lived my life. I mean, even to this day, when I look at Mount Rainier, it's a haunted place for me because of that, because of what happened to her.
Now, while the FBI does not have a person of interest in this case, there is one person who's responsible for keeping Sheila's story at the forefront in hopes that someday whoever killed her will be held accountable. You can look for part 2 of this story to hear about that tomorrow, right here on The Story. Well, that's the end of our show tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and stick around for the news at 6:30. That's next. Enjoy the rest of your night.